In an ever changing culture, how does the creative produce work that can influence people with different worldviews? Today, my guest is filmmaker Jim Schmidt, and we'll be exploring that topic with him.
Well, welcome, Jim Schmidt.
Hi, how you doing, Cheryl?
Doing good. We're so glad you could be with us today.
Thank you
for those who are watching, Jim Schmidt is a creative arts producer. He's a film producer. He is a worship leader, and he is also president of the Continental Global Foundation. So he's here today to talk to us about his work and how he tries to influence culture in all of those areas. So Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about your philosophy of creative arts and why you are drawn to that.
Well, thanks for having me on. I think it probably for me goes back to even my upbringing, the way I was raised. I grew up in Orange County, Southern California, and grew up, a lot of what I did revolved around the church and the youth group and things like that. And I happened to be at a church that was very strong in creative arts, music and productions and various things. And I did a lot of singing. I still do, but that's where it all started. But it shows up even in the other things I do now. Like one of my producing partners and my casting director is one of my buddies that I grew up with at church. She's casts a lot of movies besides ours, but she was also very involved in the creative arts there. So that's kind of where it started for me. And then even on through school, high school and things like that, and went on to travel with the ministry called the Continental Singers, which I know that you know well.
Right.
And all of those, the common thread through all of those was using art or music or some kind of creative art to share a message, to create some kind of impact of encouragement or anything, to the hearer. So my whole life has kind of been geared toward that, and so it's not a real surprise that that's what I still do. So it's debatable. You've heard the thing. People credit Aristotle with it. I don't think it was Aristotle, but one of those guys way back then said, "Give me the songs of a culture, and I will shape its people," or something like that, or I'll control its people. And regardless of who said it, it's really true. I mean, music changes our culture. Movies change our culture in a lot of ways. Some bad, some good. So there's a lot of power in storytelling, in regardless of the form that it shows up. The act of storytelling can really move culture.
Right. So tell us about some of the projects that you've done, because you've had some really interesting projects, and I'd like to hear, and I know the listeners would like to hear more about that too.
Yeah. Well, right now my main focus is in the film world, and so, which for me really started again, rooted out of my church that I grew up in. My older brother was the filmmaker, and he used to do these funny little trick photography movies, or we'd take our church choir on a 2 or 3 week tour, and he'd shoot funny little vignettes with all the people on the tour. And then when we get home, we'd have a big celebration night and watch these funny movies that he put together. And our youth pastor, who's a very influential youth pastor nationally and internationally, named Les Christie, told John, he said, you ought to make faith-based movies, and you have a real gift for it. And that's what he did. He introduced him to a well-known filmmaker back at the time who was a prophet at Fuller Seminary. And this prof said, you've got a lot of talent, go to UCLA, get your film degree, and then come to Fuller and get your MDiv, and then make movies. And that's what he did. And so I was involved in all that. I was cheap labor and starred in some of those movies way back in the early 80s that actually were kind of legendary films, like Super Christian and a few others that were very, very different. Like the first time anybody in the Christian film realm had used satire, which is Super Christian.
Okay. Okay.
So they were a lot of fun. But that's also sort of where my film journey started, because my brother always, I was focused on my Continental Singers Ministry and producing records for a lot of the internationally based groups that we have around the world. So all the Continental records that we did here, we also did them in other languages, in French and Spanish and Japanese and Korean and so forth. But my brother always said, "Oh, you'd be a good movie producer," and it was always sort of Christmas dinner chit chat. But in the late '90s, he started to do a few films for the Billy Graham organization. Ended up doing 4, and on the last one, on the 4th one, he said, "Why don't you come on?" It was a mountain climbing story, and I'd done some of that, and it was interested in that. And he said, "Why don't you just come on board and be an associate producer on this film, and let's just go have fun and make this movie?" So I did, and it really changed my life and my focus from that point on. This was 2001 that we shot that, and I just saw the power of what that storytelling on film can do. And those were more what you would call faith-based movies. We try to encourage the Graham organization to not focus on preaching to the choir, as it were, not making films that would satisfy the people who already believe like that, but maybe change the storytelling and try to tell it to other people. And we were pretty successful with that on that 4th film, that last one called The Climb. But that actually was the film I'm currently ramping up to produce now, which looks like it's going to be with Warner Brothers. We have a distribution deal with them. I actually acquired that same year, in 2001.
Wow.
My brother, it started with my mom. Before we went on location to shoot The Climb in Utah, we shot it in Salt Lake and Provo and Orem, that area. And my mom had read this New York Times best-selling novel called The Gold of Exodus. Don't read it. It's flawed, but it's based on this true story. And she said, "You guys ought to make a movie out of this. It'd be incredible." And so I opened up the book jacket, and the first thing I read was soon to be a major motion picture, Castle Rock Pictures, Warner Brothers. And I thought, well, there goes that. But then my producing partner, Dave Ross, said, "I've seen a video about those guys. It's 2 guys. It's a true story about 2 guys that snuck into Saudi Arabia and found the real biblical Mount Sinai." And he said, "I know I've seen a video about that at my church." And so he sent that video to John and I in Utah, and we watched it. I just thought, this is too good. There's got to be something we can do with this thing. And so, long story short, I won't go into the whole thing, but we made a documentary of the story in 2002. Right after we finished shooting The Climb, we started making a documentary of that called Mountain of Fire. And but the movie rights were tied up at Warner Brothers. And so here in recent years, we were able to untangle those. And now we're producing the feature film, the action thriller version of that same story. All that to say, it's not a faith-based movie. It's a mainstream movie. As you can tell, it's going to be distributed by Warner Brothers. And so, but there's a lot of powerful stuff there in that story. You talk about the biblical Mount Sinai. Well, the world's 3 major religions all consider that mountain to be holy real estate,
really significant.
Holy
Sure.
ground. Yeah, for Islam, for Judaism, and for Christianity. So we're respecting all of that in the telling of this story. So it's a really, really unique kind of story. So that's the one we're focused on at the moment. But we've done some in between. In 2004, we did Bobby Jones' Stroke of Genius, about golfer Bobby Jones, with Jim Caviezel. He had just finished shooting The Passion of the Christ. And then Bobby Jones was the next film that he did when that was with us. Malcolm McDowell, Aidan Quinn, Jeremy Northam, great cast, Claire Forlani. Then in 2006, we did The Ultimate Gift with James Garner. It was his last movie.
I remember that.
And,
I remember that film. It's about time for me to watch that one again, too.
Yeah. Well, they went on, another company went on to do a couple sequels, but this Ultimate Gift really holds up well. And it's Brian Dennehy and Abigail Breslin right after she'd gotten the Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine. And so we're very proud of that film, and a lot of people have seen it. It's interesting you can talk about influence. That film focuses on James Garner's relationship with the grandson, and James Garner's he's passed away, but he left a video testimony, and he said, "You can have my estate, billions, but you have to learn these lessons in life first." And so I won't give away any more than that, but that's the premise of it. And it's great. It's based on a book by the same title, by Jim Stovall, called The Ultimate Gift. But James Garner told us, he said, this is going to be my last one, and this is for my grandkids, so it's that kind of content. But in talking with a lot of high net worth people that I have over the last couple of years, as we've been raising, production money and so forth for Mountain of Fire, the feature, I can't tell you how many of them I've met that have said, "Oh, that's my favorite movie." In fact, one of them went so far as to say, he said, "I watched that movie with my kids," and he says, "If you don't understand these things, you're not getting my estate when I'm gone." So you're talking about influencing culture. Those kids are probably wishing it wasn't their dad's favorite movie. So, but films have a lot of power. And then the most recent one we did was Trade of Innocence with Dermot Mulroney and Mira Sorvino,
about human trafficking.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Filmed on location in Thailand.
We filmed it in Thailand. The story is actually set in Cambodia.
Okay.
But there's no movie industry in Cambodia, really. The crews, that kind of thing, and equipment. And so, but the Thailand movie industry is very robust. And so we shot it next door in Thailand. That all of them, I guess, have a different purpose. Bobby Jones was inspirational, about his great life, and it was really a unique, great man. And Ultimate Gift was a very different kind of storytelling, very inspirational. Trade of Innocence was never meant to compete in the marketplace of movies. Nobody ever says, "Hey, honey, let's go see that human trafficking movie on Friday night." It's a hard topic to deal with, but we wanted to give a truthful look at the whole complex world of human trafficking, and we're hearing a lot more about it, about that issue lately. I'm sad that it still exists, but I'm glad that it's more in the light of day now, and people are more aware that it's a real thing. It's so funny. We had people that saw the movie and thought, "Oh, it's so far-fetched. This kind of stuff doesn't happen." And now we're hearing stories of exactly the same kinds of things that were in our storyline. And so ours was not a true story, but it was all based on actual events. And so we worked with some of the premier organizations who fight trafficking, and so it was very accurate. They helped shape the script and said, this wouldn't happen this way. Let's do it. It's more like this. And so our script was shaped like that from the very beginning, even the coaching of our actors and things like that as to what really happens. That one was the goal of Trade of Innocence, was to raise the volume level of discussion about the issue of human trafficking. And that's how we framed it up at the beginning. So as a result, the success is not measured in box office, it's measured in where the film went. And so, for example, we were recognized by the White House Faith Office for that film, the State Department of Justice. Karen and I, one of our great experiences together was to do a screening of that film at the FBI headquarters, at the Hoover headquarters in Washington, for 150 special agents who do exactly what, in our case, Dermot Mulroney's character does. And they said this was dead on accurate. And so that was high praise from these people who literally risked their life to rescue these victimized people, boys and girls and men and women. There's different kinds of trafficking.
Right.
So we're
very
with that.
And when you made that film, which was what, 9-10 years ago now?
9. Yeah.
It was just coming to the forefront, I think, in our society. We were just starting to talk about it really seriously. So it was well timed. And having just watched it in the last few weeks, again for the second time, I was so struck by the fact that it really does take the viewer into the various aspects of trafficking and what it's like in the culture. Why is this happening? You look at it from different characters' perspectives. That was very well done in the film. It gave me a greater understanding as to how it happens, why it happens. It's so easy to sit in the Western world and look at another nation that is so impacted by something like human trafficking and feel like, how could that happen? Why did they let it happen, and that kind of thing. But it really does give you an idea of what the background is and why the culture is the way it is.
right.
which is good for all of us to understand.
It is, yeah.
Really.
The very first public screening we did of Trade of Innocence was actually at Yale University, and a lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, were involved, but also police departments and the State Department. We had the assistant um, uh, attorney general, one of the deputy attorney generals there, um, and they realized in the course of the weekend, FBI right down to local police departments and everybody in between. A lot of these departments and social agencies, and certainly governmental stuff, federal government, had never collaborated. Like, the information sharing had gaps in it. And so that's how a lot of this stuff would slip through the cracks. And so it was an eye-opening kind of symposium for them to realize, well, we need to coordinate at this level and this level so that we tighten that circle and have greater success in fighting this scourge. So I'm glad that there's more discussion about it, and we're hearing more things about, like, the Super Bowl. Super Bowl weekend is one of the highest periods of time of trafficking, particularly of sex trafficking in this country, is Super Bowl weekend. And so we're hearing more about arrests and raids and things like that, which is great.
So it sounds like a lot of doors opened for you once you made this film, for you to really just go take it places, like you said, take it places that needed to really see the picture of what was going on.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, they certainly know it, but it became a conversation tool, a conversation starter. So we're thrilled with that.
So Mountain of Fire, tell me, you hadn't started filming yet when the COVID shutdown happened. So that's kind of where you are right now. You're waiting to be able to get back in to start your filming on that. What kind of situations have you had come up so far that really indicate that God has got some good things in store in the making of this? Have you had some interesting conversations with people, or just give a little background on the film?
Yeah, well, it's really a fascinating story with these two guys that ended up sneaking into Saudi Arabia back in 1988, and with very different motives. Some of it was adventure, some of it was running away from some realities in life, and the things that led them there were quite different. But there's something that really profound that happens when you're there. I actually was on the mountain in Saudi Arabia in February. We climbed it on February 28th, and won't go too much into the background of it. But if you look at these guys, use the Book of Exodus, the Old Testament Book of Exodus, as a roadmap. Basically, and tried to take it literally. Okay, well, the children of Israel went here, then they went there, and they found this, and so forth. And they tried to do the same thing. And if you look at the Book of Exodus, it says 22 times that the Hebrews went out of Egypt, out of Egypt, out of Egypt. It says that 22 times, out of Egypt. It also says that the mountain is in the land of Midian, which has always been the northwest quadrant of present-day Saudi Arabia. And so the traditional mountain is in the middle of the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula, but there really isn't much evidence there to indict that as being the real mountain. And yet the mountain they found, and where I've been now in Saudi Arabia, it's everywhere. As Bob Cornuke, one of the two characters, says, it looks like a movie set where they just left all the set pieces lying around. It's littered with evidence all over the place, and so it's very compelling. And I think Bob's been asked more than once, isn't it better to just leave it alone if it's a controversial site, the world's three major religions? And Bob's attitude is, why can't it be a unifying thing? Because it's important to the world's three major religions. Why can't it be a unifying thing? And so that's sort of gave us a little guidance in terms of how we wanted to tell this story. And but yeah, we've seen some amazing things. I mean, Saudi Arabia's been closed to tourism for at least 4 decades. I mean, it was open many, many years ago, and then it's been closed down, locked down. There's been a lot of change there. And so it really just about 18 months ago opened for tourism. And so what are the odds that it would open up right now as we're ramping up to shoot this?
Mm-hmm.
We now have the opportunity to shoot a few selected scenes at the actual mountain. We're going to shoot most of the movie in Jordan, in southern Jordan, but that's the stone's throw. It's about 90 kilometers away over the border to the actual mountain. And so now we have permission to do that, and so that in itself is revolutionary. A lot of things like that. That are really in our favor. And you think about it, Warner Brothers has had the rights to the story, the movie rights, since 1994.
And they hadn't done anything. Huh?
No, well, they did a lot. They invested a lot of money to have a couple scripts written by big writers, names that people would recognize. They had a director that people would recognize attached, a producer, an actor, also household name. So they circled around it for a long time, and I'm not one who over spiritualizes things, but I look back on 2001 when I first got connected with Bob Cornuke, and he said, what I really need is a new documentary because there's new information. And so that's what we did, the documentary, and released it in 2002. But I said to him in our first few months of developing our friendship, I said, I don't know why, but I believe in my gut. I'm the guy that's supposed to produce this movie. And I don't know why I'm saying it, but that's just what I feel. And here we are, 19 years down the track, and we're on this journey together, and it's really remarkable. And so, and Warner, I think, no discredit to them, they're great people and they make a lot of great movies, but I think maybe because of the content, they didn't quite know how to tell it. They felt like, is this an Indiana Jones, fantasy treasure hunt, or is this some spiritual thing? And we don't want to do that. And so it's really neither of those. And so I just think we have a better way to tell it, and we're excited that we have a distribution agreement with them, and off we go. So we're excited. So yeah, as soon as it's interesting. You ask about God showing up. It happened with the COVID thing. I was there. I got home March 5th from Saudi Arabia. In fact, the flight from Riyadh landed in Amman. We had about a layover in Amman, Jordan, and then to Frankfurt, and then Chicago and Denver, and then finally for me back to home in California. And this is when Italy was already shutting down. In fact, the new Mission Impossible movie had just started. While we were in Saudi, Tom Cruise in the new Mission Impossible movie was starting to shoot in Venice, and they had to shut down, which is costly in the movie business. And so we were originally scheduled to shoot this past spring in Jordan. And had we been fully on schedule, we'd have been shut down too. And so for like a major studio, they can pretty much afford to throw money at a problem, and you have to with a delay. Think about it. If you shut down your production, you got to send your crew home, got to send your actors home. So you're buying flights. Yeah. Those actors may be committed to other films. Now you may have to delay even more, so let them shoot that other film. And then if you can still get that actor back, you got to bring them back to the location, and deals that you have to close out and redo, and it could be millions. And so for us, our budget's not the size of a traditional studio film, but it's a lot of money, tens of millions. And so a $5 to $7 million additional hit due to a shutdown is a big deal for us. We can't throw money at a problem. So that was a blessing that we weren't in production. I'll gladly wait to, and fortunately with the vaccine thing coming down the pike, and hopefully that changes everything for people around the world, and certainly for us for productions. There are a few productions happening in the world right now, but not anywhere near as many. And they have all these extreme COVID protocols, and a new crew person you have to hire to monitor the COVID situation. And it's crazy. So, really hoping and praying this vaccine is effective and comes very soon.
Yeah.
So,
I wanted to ask you about something I saw on social media. We were involved in a little bit of a discussion about Cuties, the new, very controversial show that Netflix is airing, and there was a whole boycott of Netflix going on. And you were very verbal against the show Cuties, but you didn't feel that canceling Netflix was necessarily effective. And so I'd like to kind of hear your thinking along that line.
Yeah, well, and I know some people feel different. Let me back it up and say I've never been a big fan of the boycott thing because I don't think it really wins. Give you an example. I remember back, I even forget what the boycott was about, but it was boycott Disney. A lot of the church people, especially, were saying boycott Disney for various things. And I never quite got that. It's like, I view not just Hollywood, but I just kind of view life in general as sort of a mission field. Like I want to do good. I want to try to, reflect something, in my case, Christ-like, because I'm a follower of Christ. I want to convey that kind of image to anybody that I'm with. And so it'd be like somebody saying, I'm really, I'm a missionary and I'm really passionate about, whatever, Indonesia, but there's more Muslims there and than any other country in the world. And so I don't agree with that. So I'm going to boycott Indonesia. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. If you have a heart for a certain country, you learn the culture, you learn the language, you build relationships, and you change things and influence things from the inside out. And that's the way I feel with certainly with filmmaking and so forth. I don't think boycotting Netflix really makes the difference. I think it's important to speak out on stuff that we think is inappropriate, and I think a lot of thousands, probably millions of people did around the country and maybe around the world. You watch the trailer of the Cuties thing, and it's clearly despicable. These are young girls being exploited. And it harkens back to the conversation we had about the trafficking issue. That kind of stuff feeds it. And so, but I just don't think that boycotting it makes any sense. Netflix isn't going away. And so I think if we want to see better stuff come out of Netflix, we got to create it, produce it, and we've got to build relationship there, and we got to have our voice heard, just like you would in a political environment. It's better to have conversation and to air your views in a civil way. And I feel the same about that kind of influence on Netflix. So, I just don't think you change something by boycotting it and pretending it doesn't exist. Or worse, cloistering in our own little circle and producing only content that we all love and agree with.
Right.
I'm not interested in preaching to the choir. I never have been. And there are a lot of films that are in the faith-based world, and that's great. That every film deserves an audience, and those guys are friends of mine, and they do a great job, and people appreciate them, and that's good. That's a good thing. It's just not the kind of film I want to make. And so, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of.
It does. I mean, it basically sounds like you're saying, I want a voice in what's going on in the entertainment world, and cloistering basically ends that for you. So you're wanting a seat at the table. You're wanting a voice in the discussion. So I totally understand your line of thinking with that. And it is pretty important because we do have a lot of the boycotting mentality going on in our environment, which is pretty contrary to the whole salt and light concept that we see in the Bible, where Christians are supposed to be in the culture, but not of it. But we're supposed to be informing the culture by our presence, by the way we live, our interaction, our conversation, all those things.
Right. Yeah. Boycotting doesn't seem a whole lot different than a cancel culture attitude toward
true. Very true.
I want to shut other people down. I'd rather get our voices out there and tell stories that make people think, so. Yeah,
that's something to think about. I appreciate you sharing that viewpoint on there. So how can people get in touch with you? And also, if they have questions, and also, how can they view your work and kind of follow what you're doing? I'd like you to give your information on that.
Sure. Thank you. Most of the films are all on the major streaming platforms. So Amazon or iTunes and several of the others. Certain ones, Trade of Innocence is not a faith-based film. at all. But it's I know that one is on christiancinema.com, which is a company of a friend of mine, Bobby Downs. So they're out there on most of the streaming services. Bobby Jones, Ultimate Gift, and Trade of
And
Innocence.
then the name of your company is Dean River Productions, right?
Yeah, my brother named it, and that the Dean River is a real place in central British Columbia. It's one of the premier fly fishing trout rivers in
Oh,
the
okay.
world, and we used to
I
go
wondered about that.
many summers, and so it's a magic place for us, and so that's what he named the company. So, but our company website is deanriver.net, and it'll highlight some of our films there and the people that we've worked with and so forth. And of course, IMDb, we're all, stuff's listed on IMDb. So,
Well, when do you hope, I know it's pretty hard to project in this kind of thing, but when do you hope that Mountain of Fire will be out for us to view?
probably early 2022. So our
Okay.
goal, if we're monitoring all the COVID stuff like the whole world is, but if this vaccine comes around, and the little bit of the complexity is that we're shooting in 3 places. We're shooting in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and North Carolina, and all of which have their own COVID realities, and
Right, right.
But in perfect world scenario, if we can get this vaccine happening and those countries are, good to go, and then we can shoot, in the spring ideally, and post production through the rest of the year, and then maybe by, with any luck, a year from now, basically have a finished film ready to go out to market. So my guess is it would probably be released theatrically after the first of next year of 2022.
Okay.
So,
Well, good. We'll look forward to that.
yeah, hope so. I'll be sure to circle back and make sure your listeners are aware. So,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jim. Appreciate the conversation. It's always
Yeah.
great to connect, and we'll look forward to Mountain of Fire and whatever else God puts on your plate.
Thank you very much.
Great.
It's great to see you again, Cheryl. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please check the show notes beneath each post. They will contain important links regarding the content you've just viewed. Also, to make sure that you don't miss a post, please click subscribe.